Hi, this is Kaolin from the Essence of Transformation, and this is a series of work that we're doing on talking about race, a workbook about white people, fostering racial equality in their lives. Well, we're all very busy. We're busy every single day and night. We're busy with our children, hoping to raise them in an environment that is supportive of them and their needs. We're hoping to inform and educate and support one another as we go through these incredibly difficult times we're undergoing, especially about racism. And we're looking at capitalism and how much it impacts racism. We're looking at violence and how deeply effective violence is in perpetuating racism. We're looking at stereotypes and paying attention to the so-called norms of our culture, which often amount to bigotry, resistance, hatred. We are certainly conscious of people who are deeply invested in cross-cultural communication. It is so powerfully effective that that's why those professors and educators and programs in institutions are now being taken away. I am completely convinced that this is temporary. I believe that this is a cyclical aspect of the transformation of this country. And it is also bringing to light the horrifying controls of racism in all of our lives. And it is also going to be a catalyst, ultimately, for healing. In the process, however, the magnitude of suffering is simply exhausting. And at the same time, if you look at it in terms of systemically what's going on and how easily manipulated many of us have been in the culture, then it is easier to disengage, unwind ourselves out of the wiring and the mechanisms of it that keep us controlled by racism. So, I'm happy to see so many people are listening to the show. I think it's a challenging show to listen to, but I think it's an important one to listen to. Most everybody that I'm very close to is an activist and has been an activist all their lives. And I think that if you think about activism, you will look back in your own life and notice those experiences that you had in which what was so-called normal or okay was not okay with you. And therefore you stepped up, you stepped out, you took a certain kind of courage, a certain kind of certainty regarding your position anywhere, on a job, in a school, anywhere, where you had said, you're not going to be going with the flow. You have something else to contribute, and you're going to present yourself with that tremendous advantage of changing something that others may consider unusual. However, it's really important that we're constantly learning how to be ourselves, that we're constantly learning how to engage in relationships, that we're constantly pursuing cross-cultural communication without it being some form of philanthropy or charity or some kind of absurd part of the psychology of racism, which is as if you're not a racist, you're doing somebody a favor. Well, you're doing yourself a favor. That's what you're doing. So I had hoped that this program would be considered a catalyst for healing, and healing comes with recognition, and it comes with more knowledge, and it comes with more of a primary relationship to oneself as they figure things out about themselves. And it has nothing to do with, let's say, pointing a finger at somebody else. It really doesn't. It just simply is an admission that we were raised with certain kinds of values and certain kinds of assumptions about ourselves and one another that served only one purpose, and that purpose was to alienate and to estrange us from one another. And that was the point. And we're getting over it. We're getting over that. So in this episode, what I'm going to be doing is, I know that I had stopped midway at chapter 3, and I thought I would go ahead and read chapter 4. But first, I'm going to do a few other things, and then if there's enough time, I'll do the other, and if not, I'll do it in the next episode. Meanwhile, I think everybody knows that they can always get my book on Amazon, and they can get it at other indie bookstores and other retail bookstores. So it is out there. It's out and about. So part of what I was very interested in reading first was my own definition of racism. And in the book, you have writing intervals and you have opportunities to form your own opinion about what racism actually is. I find that from the beginning of the book to the end, you're going to change your mind about racism. Most everyone I've spoken to who has done this said definitely, absolutely, just through consciously working through this book, what they first thought was a definition of racism for them in the beginning of the book did not end up being what it was at the end. I think that's wonderful. So I'm going to read you mine. My definition of racism is on page 115. Racism is a systemic, psychological, and economic approach to life imposed upon the psyche of individuals from infancy onward. Its origins were created out of the myth that white people are superior to people of color. Through slavery and enforced labor, it has survived and will continue to survive as long as white privilege remains intact. It can be unlearned just as it has been learned. Racism relies upon ignorance in order to remain effective. It cannot bear to give up power. It loves money, fears poverty, and despises sobriety. Racism thrives on all addictions, and yet it loathes attachment. It is at once deeply personal, while it is wholly incapable of intimacy. So that was my definition of racism. And it still is. It has withstood the tests of time. And you will have your own. And you can pause for a moment right now and sit down and start writing some key words about what you think racism is. There's two other things that are important for me to read to you before I go on to chapter 3 and 4. And one of them is an essay that I had written on this subject a while back. And it's titled, Seeing Racism for the First Time While Struggling with Its Implications. Have you noticed when you disagree with a white person regarding entitlement or racism and deprivation, you might feel the very foundation of your soul crumbling beneath your feet? There could be no denial there is often a painful descent into a surprising misunderstanding between yourself and whomever you're talking to. A thin, black line may have been drawn between both of you. Only one of the two of you may have benefited from the moment. Many relationships do not survive this transition. It is too raw, too honest, and in our culture, one has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to the origins of white privilege and when it comes to how much we all rely upon one another for racial healing and social justice, because there is no end to the need for communication. In 2019, especially, we are getting a look at how difficult it is to meet on common ground or reach understandings because so much is at stake when you enter the relationship zone. Most all of us are quite scared of this part of our evolution. Now we know what serious trouble we are in. While activism creates bridges of hope and understanding, the root of the problems can only be addressed by you in your personal life. Therefore, the moments of conflict, of alienation or hopelessness will multiply because relating is relating, and denial interferes, as denial puts the accent on disruption. Disruption leads to anger and disharmony in cross-cultural relations, which can shut us all down. If white people withdraw, they won't come out. They won't work on what they do not know or understand. We see this all the time. We see discouragement on white folks' faces when they try to get racism, especially when poor, as the newly poor, still resent and reject the fact of white privilege, no matter who speaks to them about it, because something about it is too painful. In the midst of your own suffering, you, when white, often refuse to be compromised or diminished by the facts. Healing from racism is a process which requires self-recognition. We whites and blacks have been informed about one another through radical stereotypes, through racial stereotypes. Stereotypes have also informed all of us of our self-worth, and racism has held up a mirror to each of us to show us who we are in a white supremacist paradigm. None of us asked for this, but here it is. Moments of conflict that are so powerful we are presented with our naivete, ignorance, or prejudices are unsettling. Those moments can alienate us from one another when we may have finally gathered up the courage to voice our concerns about racism to others. It can be frightening when people will not speak about it in your circle. As one client of mine said to me, it is scary. For decades, white people had not realized how violent racism really is. Now they're getting it. Now we know. Condescension about this subject does not work, just as teaching while insulting does not work. When someone is wounded, you do not stand there pouring salt on the wound. You do get what is needed to start to heal it. You cannot be in a hurry. It won't work, as rushing creates more anxiety. So what do? You keep finding things out, putting it together. Racism is puzzling. Your role in it when you are white is confusing. Recovery from any addiction is not easy. It is always work. Where are the missing pieces you might be in need of discovering right now to help you figure it out? Where are you? What do you want? How are you going to be working the racial equality muscle? A welcoming encouragement from others may not be around the corner. People are harried. You do not have to be. Recovery takes steps. It is a process. There are conflicts as you start to express and seek out your own ability to work on racism, diluting its influence over you. When you are able to focus your attention on uncovering your prejudices and want to take the blindfold off, let me know. Get a sense of direction and validation for your efforts. Why? A suspicion of motives could be next. Discussing racism is hard. No comfort zones. It is a search into the underworld. You are entering the land of the forbidden. Alienation kicks in if it requires too much effort or too much loneliness. I see it all the time. It does not take long. It doesn't take much to be rejected while finding racism out and where you fit into the mix. It can take a little longer. But don't be confused. Racism is cunning. Dissolving it requires self-knowledge. Yours is a voice you may not have used before. I did decide that I would read the glossary to you today because I'm already using a few words that I've already used during the episodes. And I thought, it did occur to me that you may not know what some of the words do mean, so I'm going to do that right now. Apathy, a lack of feeling or emotion. Chattel slavery, movable property, in this case, Africans. Collective guilt, denoting a group of persons, considered a single unit, with an awareness of wrongdoing or crimes accompanied by feelings of remorse or shame. Color blindness, inability to identify something or someone by using colors. Comfort zone, condition or degree of comfort. Cumulative prejudices, biases that gradually build up over time. Defenses, a method of protecting something. Denial, a refusal to acknowledge the existence of something. Disassociate, to disconnect things in your mind. Disassociation, to disconnect from. Unpleasantness, disclosure. Pain. Disclosure, secret information made public. DWB, driving while white and black. European white male or female in a car with a driver of color. What happens? I go deeply into that with a relationship between two men in the book, Roger and William, when they get picked up, and how it alters their relationship involuntarily, right away. Fairy tale ending, happy ending based on fantasy. False innocence and absence of guilt that is not based on the truth. Freeze, to be unable to act, react, or speak in a normal way. Guilt and awareness of wrongdoing. Inclusion, presence in a group. Institutionalized racism, to establish white supremacy as normal. Learned helplessness, refusing to take charge. Multiculturalism of more than one culture. Narcissism, excessive self-admiration and self-centeredness. Psychic integration, organization of thoughts in the human mind. A quagmire of conflict, an awkward or dangerous conflict. Race story, your own history and history within. Racial danger zone, entering an area about race that is no longer comfortable. Racial equality, equality between the races. Racist assumptions, ideas formed and developed from racist ideas. A stereotype, reducing somebody to an overly simplified behavior or action. A white box, fear. So you go back into the white box. White privilege, benefits in society for being a white person. And those are just some of the words that were used throughout the book. I also wanted to mention that last episode, episode 8, I did read Jacqueline Williams's foreword to the study guide. It's not the foreword in the book. It is in the study guide, which can accompany the book. And I just wanted to clarify that today because I hadn't realized that at the time. So, I think today I might take some of the quotes from the students specifically from different chapters. I don't believe I'm going to read each chapter in its entirety today. However, I will do that before this series is over. And it should be over by episode 12 should be the last episode of this particular series. So in chapter 4, responsibility and right privilege, one of the students had said, I have a fear to stand up for oneself and know my boundaries when someone has threatened me. I notice that it's something I've been dealing with for a long time. I do see women of color do it often, even with humor. I am so used to seeing this as a lack of survival skills in white women, but now I believe it may be the effect of an abundance of privilege. Have you ever wondered how one person of color can represent all people of color wherever they go? That has not happened to white people, has it? You are never referred to as a white woman who came into the store to buy juice, the white player who just joined the team, or the white teacher who taught class the other day. White people tend to retain individual identities. We can excel without the assumption that we have to bring the rest of us up a notch in class or status. We can take full credit for our accomplishments and carry that independent credit with us wherever we go. If we mess up, we do that on our own too. It doesn't reflect on all white people. This is one of the privileges we do enjoy as white people. Just pausing for a moment to think things over. There's a writing interval in chapter 4, and here are some of the questions from it. Where do you have a high status? Is it in school, at work, in your family, in your neighborhood, in a religious environment or community? And where do you have low status, and you know it? Do you have unearned status in any part of your life? Think about that for a second. There are more questions, but I'm going to move on and just take pieces. Just taking some pieces today. People of color do not have the privilege of assuming a higher status in their lives, but white people do. When I spoke about David, actually Roger and William, in the chapter about driving while black and white, they were simply going out. They knew each other as friends, and they were going to hang out together during the day. And when they were hanging out, a cop came because William was driving and he happened to be of color. So he stopped for no reason at all, looked into the car suspiciously at both of them. Roger had never had an experience like this before. Roger was white. Although he'd heard of these kinds of incidents, he had not ever been in a situation where he experienced it for himself. And it was dealt with, and they were able to move on. However, it caused a lot of silence between them in the car. William was definitely not interested in discussing it, and Roger was extremely sensitized to the transitions that William appeared to be undergoing, because he certainly was non-communicative. And at some point, Roger began to understand what he had heard about racism, because there was no reason for them to be stopped at all. He also did not like how the white cop looked inside the car at both of them, and really looked at Roger as if with some kind of dissatisfaction, some kind of, what are you doing in here? Or what are you doing? A friend of mine told me about her being stopped once in a car with two black friends, and they were stopped as well. And she was really surprised at the aggression of the cop. However, she was prepared for that because she had heard enough about it, so she was prepared. But it was humiliating, and it was scary. But they remained safe and kept going. So I think when you do examine racism seriously and you start to get more tuned into how frightening it is, just in case you are listening to the program and you're not that tuned into that aspect of it, it is something to stop and think about and pay attention to. and to be somewhat prepared for, so that as you do go out and about, you're not completely clueless about things that can happen to you. And for myself, I think one of the challenges in doing this program right now is, of course, Gaza, and of course, the stopping diversity education and the degree of the hatred that younger generations are being exposed to and their families. I won't go into each category of all the politics that's going on right now that is just absolutely outrageous. But I will say that there are certain ways and tools that I use in my work that have helped me to cope and to continue to work. And I do feel that at this point, however, things have gotten so completely overwhelming that I'm actually going to have several episodes and let you know in advance so that you can call in and you can talk about what you've been learning or what you're also undergoing. Because I think we're all in a state of emergency. We're all in a state of emergency. What are we being confronted with right now? Even if you've been an activist in so many different areas for decades. I think one part of what's going on this year is people are getting sicker and sicker. There's a lot of toxicity in the air, for example. We're not entirely sure about the food that we're eating at all. And most people's finances are going down the drain, if they had them to begin with at all, that it's been less and less and less. And programs have been taken away that bring us back to that fundamental insecurity regarding education and encouragement. On the other hand, Harvard's giving free courses now. I just read that today. But in a way, frankly, I'm a little flabbergasted, so I don't plan to be on each episode, but this week has been beyond belief. So I was discussing with a friend of mine, both of us are going to be kind of rethinking the tools that we're going to have to be using in order to cope better. And both of us are extremely busy. So we're going to have to keep doing that. I imagine that you all are doing the same thing. When I do have the show, please do call in and let us know what you're doing and how you are managing. For myself, I've only increased my work. It has not decreased, it has increased. So I've returned to multitasking big time. And I think that communication with people has improved. I notice people are calling each other more in the last 3 months. They are giving each other some kind of foundational comfort zone and reassurance that you can call and vent and express whatever you're undergoing regarding how devastated you are with the latest changes. I haven't met anybody in the last 2 months who has not just started crying when I saw them, because I think in ways we are not even that conscious of. We withhold grief, and we withhold grief, and we withhold it for as long as we can. And then, fortunately, when you do see somebody who knows you really well and knows what your life is really about, you're finally able to just kind of relax and you really sit there and just cry. Remember that during COVID, grieving together was taken away from us because of COVID. So that was a big deal. And we're still recovering from COVID, but there's very little mention of that. And so I think it's something that, at least in my circle, we do return to COVID and we do discuss what are some of the ways in which we've transcended some of the difficulties we had a year or two ago? What are some of the very creative outcomes of what we have done during it? And this is not to say that everybody can do something and be enormously productive during these cycles. It's not to say that. Certainly that's not true. But I'm just sharing with you some of what the politics in the country has been doing to me and affecting me, and how I've been dealing with it. So I'm going to really close the show now. So it is a shorter show than I had expected. And I'm very glad that I got an opportunity to check in and say hello. I am planning some real surprises in the other episodes, which is reciting poetry as well as reading from the book, and even singing. There are a couple of really fantastic songs that I'm going to be singing. And I want you to just kind of relax. This show is not like the other shows today. I think that all I need to do is see one or two headlines, and my own attention shifts. It shifts to the degree, the magnitude of suffering I'm reading about. So it compounds my own. It complicates my own. I listen to people who are scared to death of losing their jobs and schools, losing their schools being closed down, hospitals being closed down. The job that you thought you would have for the rest of your life, which is essentially a vocation, could have ended this week. I'm extremely sensitized to the fact that there have been so many, many, many endings. So in keeping with the times right now, I'm actually going to end this episode. However, I am looking forward to the next one. I do plan to read more for the next one from the book. I do plan to have several shows in which you can call in with your comments and your questions. So perhaps before you transition to something else to do, you might want to take a moment and actually write down what you might like to call in about. There will be the other chapters, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. So that is 3 more episodes in which those chapters will be read. And I'm very much looking forward to that. But I also trust pausing right now, and pausing and focusing on the grief that I'm feeling about several people, about several experiences in the world that we're all undergoing, certainly about Gaza. And the list seems to just go on and on and on lately. So instead of moving on as usual, I'm actually going to close the show right now. And thank you very much for tuning in. And I realize it's quite possible that some of you who are listening to it right now may also need to be pausing for a minute, may also need to be getting in touch with their own grief and express it. And I'm really going to dedicate this show to all the people who are suffering from the absolutely dreadful horrors of the last 3 months of politics. I feel most especially for children and their families, because to those of you who are raising children under these circumstances, I think about you every day. I think, how would I have been able to raise my son when he was 5, 6, and 7, and 8 in the climate, with all of the photos and all of the horrifyingly damaging perspectives, not only about women, but about men, that are all over the media right now. I feel very much like children need childhoods. They really need a childhood. And then no matter what comes in the future for them, whether they can handle it or not, will always be up to them, just as it's been up to you. But at least you have that youthfulness and the perspectives of childhood. And I feel like a lot of that has been blown, completely blown. And I so empathize with parents and guardians and grandparents and grandfathers, and how do you do it? How do you do it? And maybe you'll come on my show one day and you would actually tell us what you're doing, what kind of philosophy you have, what's really been working. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I am always working and hoping for peace. So I will talk to you next week for episode 10. And during that one, I will absolutely read from the book and read chapter 3 and chapter 4. Absolutely. Thank you so much, and have as fine a day as you possibly can have.